Welcome to Bethlehem Backchat, where we talk about the background and backstories of our worship and community as Lutherans.
I'm Pastor Dan Smail, Senior Pastor at Bethlehem Lutheran Church in Glenshaw.
And I'm Wendy Farone, a member here at Bethlehem and producer of the podcast. The topic for today, interesting one, is self-control, which in the Bible is mentioned as a fruit of the Spirit.
Exactly right. Galatians, yeah. I'm sure we'll get to that eventually.
We will. So, Pastor Dan, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you ever known one of those people who see the sunny side up of everything? And listen, I'm not going to say any names, but his initials are Dan Smail.
No.
Yeah. So as a pastor, do you have to take a class on being kind and happy all the time?
There's actually a series of 3 classes that you have to make you know. No, there absolutely not. There is no such class. But, I can say as you develop spiritually and as you spend time in seminary and study and then even dwell with the people of God, eventually you do begin to see life through a certain lens that helps you see with a little bit more perspective. And I can't pretend to always be on the sunny side. If I give you that impression, fantastic.
That's great.
I'm grateful for that. But no, for sure. I mean, my spirit gets heavy just like everybody else's.
Sure.
But I think it's, again, it's more about maintaining composure and sustaining a non-anxious presence, even amid some difficult circumstances.
Regardless.
Yeah, exactly.
You really used to be annoyed by those kind of people that walked around with that disposition all the time.
Well, I'm glad I could be of service, Wendy. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, mainly because my lens, as you mentioned, or my view, had negativity behind it.
Sure.
And, those 7 deadlies are in the way, envy and jealousy and wishing and hoping. And it looked like everybody else had what I wanted. And so when I would strive to get it, it wouldn't work out. We live lives of want.
Yeah.
Right? When actually we have everything we need. We just don't realize it.
Well, you said a mouthful there.
Yeah.
I mean, sincerely, you can't even imagine. So many people wrestle with this very thing. So hopefully, as you were going through that, you didn't feel alone, because all of us are contending with those emotions of jealousy and competition and figuring out where we sort of fit in the pecking order, and then feeling really, really smug about that or really, really insecure about that. And we can go on and on and on. But eventually, those insecurities drive a certain dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And drive a kind of desire in our lives that really can result in a serious level of distraction, right?
For sure.
That we find ourselves unable to recognize and see the goodness that is around us in any given moment.
That's so true.
Right.
Fortunately, I'm on the other side of that. And a lot of that came from becoming very active and engaged in church and surrounding myself with positive people and friends. And, I think I've maybe mentioned this before, but you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
That's probably, yeah.
And so if you're hanging around negativity, you're going to project negativity.
Right.
And positivity begets positivity. But you
Makes
can't.
a lot of sense. My mom always said, be careful who you hang out with. So maybe
you were the one, not her family.
Maybe it stretches well beyond high school. No, that's good. That's really good wisdom, sincerely.
That's really true. Yeah. How does one turn that around? So I'm thinking, as the saying goes, it's like how you get to Carnegie Hall. You practice.
Absolutely, I agree.
And I think that God will put in front of you all kinds of occasions with people and places and issues in your life that give you an opportunity to practice looking at it through a different lens.
Yeah, you have to live the model.
You do.
I mean, and as you suggest, and you're absolutely right, God affords us plenty of opportunities to find our way through those difficult situations and also come to a deeper understanding of the emotions within us that are driving our behaviors. Yeah. And we see it in Scripture. I mean, so clearly this is not something, I think it's very, very prevalent and relevant. It's not something that's new. I mean, all the way back in Proverbs, for instance. I mean, Proverbs 14:29, you'll read something Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. So, clearly the biblical writers are understanding the limitations of reactive behavior, of not thinking through our response to any given set of circumstances.
Well, sure. And if you think back about those, I like to refer to those as adult temper tantrums.
Well, yeah.
The
bad thing is, not to interrupt, I really apologize, okay. But I think the bad thing is about, and maybe we can touch on this later, but the bad thing about adult temper tantrums is that there's nobody around to correct us.
No, that's true.
So, when the child has a temper tantrum, they get sent to timeout, or there's some consequence. They lose their phone, or they don't get TV that night, and they live with, right?
The consequences.
Right. And they have to tend to them and figure out which is more valuable, like having these things that I enjoy or losing my temper.
Yeah.
When we become adults, there's no system of checks and balances. In some cases, the bully gets away with all kinds of coercive behavior that they shouldn't be, because we are living in this adult world. And in fact, there should be some corrective, right? There should be some limit that we're holding people accountable to. But anyway.
And what I found is I am my own corrective. And the reason why is because I think about how I feel.
Yeah.
After I've been angry. Or I think about how I feel when I feel like I stepped on the toes of somebody else. Or I come to something unprepared or something. I have to recognize the consequences of those behaviors. A lot of it is the way I feel. I have to tune in to how I feel about that.
I want you to kind of spell this out a little bit more for us. So you're talking clearly about a sense of self-awareness.
Right.
For you, how does that translate then to self-control? How do you bridge the gap between those two elements of discernment? So
thinking about a situation where, for instance, and I'm not a road rager, but I know a lot who have. But there are times when I'm at the end of my rope driving down the road, right? And the person...
What typically sets that off? Just somebody erratic driving, or they're too
driving
slow,
is not moving as fast as they should be going.
Okay.
And especially
so they're holding you back.
I make all kinds of judgments about their parents, their personalities,
their age. Yeah, no,
right?
We can laugh, but it's absolutely...
They're distracted. They're on their phone. The idiots. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then I've learned, truly have learned, that when that feeling that I get when I'm like that says to me in my head, take a breath, stop. And then I have to think, what if that person just had a medical procedure and can't drive quickly?
Yeah. Well, and I got to say, too, there's a professional truck driver that's near and dear to my heart, really good guy. And I was complaining in his presence one time about traffic that I was dealing with. And he calms me down. This is a truck driver now who lives this life. And he says to me, Dan, you have to understand, you are not in traffic. You are that traffic.
You are.
And I'm going to tell you something that opened up a whole new world to me.
Sure.
And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, I see this barrier, right? But who's behind me?
Yeah.
It's so easy to lose ourselves in that sense of I'm being imposed upon.
That's right.
It's all about me.
The world revolves around me.
How dare the cosmos delay me for 38 seconds.
I've got things to do.
But that's really what it boils down to.
Well, think about it this way. What about in a world where we're surrounded, especially in the Western part of the world, we're surrounded with money and we have to have everything. We have to have 18 of this and 20 of that. And the jealousy that could really set into a person when you feel like you have less than you want.
Right.
And that causes you to feel like you're unworthy. Yeah. And that unworthiness turns into anger.
Well, and frustration.
And frustration. Yeah. And it comes
resentment. I mean, we can keep
Yeah, for
on.
Sure. Yeah. You have to do something with that. You have to do something with that emotion.
And I think it's wise. I think it's wise to articulate that to start with. Because so often we treat the symptoms, but don't get to the heart of the matter.
Very true.
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
And I think that's the first thing that we have to own up to is this perpetual, questing and striving and that can seem noble in and of itself. but can also result in so much frustration and insecurity.
Yep.
And it's that emotion that then drives the outburst.
That's right. And being able to intervene by being aware of yourself. Ooh, what am I feeling that for? Why am I judging that person? Why am I feeling this rage because this person's going slower?
Yeah.
What's that all about? And I think those things, if we can't recognize those things and stop them before we behave in a way that is negative out into the world, we lose our ability to gain the fruits of the Spirit, which is that self-control.
Yeah, and I think we need to diagnose ourselves to a certain degree, and I
Absolutely.
think we also need to be honest about the culture in which we live. And one thing I would mention in this podcast as we talk about self-control is we are trying to lift up the value of this virtue. We are now living in a culture that is lifting up the value of its opposite.
That's true.
All you need to do is go to your YouTube shorts or your suggested Facebook feed, and what you're going to find there are people losing their temper and then taking that to the next level and throwing haymakers at one another.
Yeah.
And then throwing that out into the interweb so that you can get 3.5 million views. And you may have a few people that are sitting around saying, oh, isn't that terrible? But you have a number of folks that view that as
Go get 'em.
Entertainment.
Yeah, that's
And then
right.
we're glorifying, sincerely, we are glorifying lack of self-control, loss of temper, and assaulting one another.
That's right.
Physically.
Yeah. Well,
Physical violence.
Yeah.
So we have people say, what does it bother these podcasts? Come on, listen. We have a lot to work on.
we do.
We got to diagnose some of this stuff and get back to the fundamentals to train our spirits up. And now, if we can, I think that that's a good transition to taking that sort of cultural diagnosis and then saying, Wendy, what's the portion of Scripture that can be the antidote to this kind of thing? And you mentioned it earlier.
The fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah, exactly.
When I hear the fruit of the Spirit, I think of the Fruit of the Loom logo.
I did not think you were going there. I really did not.
You know me well enough.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So in Galatians 5, they lay this out. And what they're talking about is when you have the Spirit within you, the Holy Spirit within you, becomes benefits from that emotional stability in your mood and your emotion and how you act in love to others. Yeah. Because as soon as I go off the rails, I'm going to impact those people around me, and in not a very loving way.
Yeah. So the cool thing is there's an interesting sort of play on the English words that are in use here, spelled the same way. But you can have produce, and your boss at work can expect you to produce. And in the fruits of the Spirit, we have both of those concepts coming together in a really sort of interesting and life-giving way.
Yeah.
Because the Spirit is at work within us, right? We acknowledge that the Spirit is at work within us, producing these virtues. But the insinuation of the biblical text is that then it's a kind of produce.
Yes.
That comes out, these fruits, right? That are able to be shared with other folks around us.
That's right.
So we do the producing, right? But others get to consume, by the nature of our life-giving interactions, the produce, these fruits of the Spirit.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, listen.
You didn't just make that up. Come on.
Can't you just see the sunny side?
Yeah, there you go. Goodness.
Yeah. No, obviously thought about that before, but I still think it bears repeating. It's absolutely worth.
Makes perfect sense that way. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. So let's go through. Okay. I just want to talk about what the fruits of the Spirit are.
Okay. Paul is not just tossing out a bunch of nice words here. I mean, there's definitely some intention behind what he's up to.
Yes.
So go ahead.
The first one is love. Every emotion, negative or positive, all comes from the need to be loved.
Right.
Right? The next one is joy. And that, for me, that's that little when you feel loved and you feel centered and you're all's right with the world, you get that little leap of the spirit in your heart.
I mean, we have touched on this in other
We
podcasts,
have.
but this is one of Paul's most important insights. Happiness is one thing, and we were kind of kidding around about happiness before, and happiness is great. I don't want to take anything away from happiness, but joy and happiness are not the same. And Paul teaches in more than one place that we are to be experiencing joy amid all things. This is important.
Amid all
things.
Good, bad, and indifferent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that life can't be about a simple aversion of trouble.
True.
And the people that skirt around it most successfully are the happiest folks. And I mean, that's a very sort of flawed philosophical view that the early Christians left behind from the very beginning. Their insinuation, their instruction was, no, this Christian life is not convenient. It will involve some difficulty, but it's okay. But because by the grace of God, we know this joy, this security, this feeling of fulfillment and purpose, even as we are navigating the challenge. So that's really, really essential for folks to understand.
Agreed.
This is not about discovering some tiptoe through the tulips. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's an honest acknowledgement of the complexity of life, but the assurance that comes from knowing Christ.
That's
so I think it's
amazing,
beautiful that these two kind of kick off the list.
Agreed. They're fantastic. The next one, which is really timely, is peace.
Right on.
Peace, I guess, within your
Shalom,
human nature and
right,
the spirit, right? But also peace with yourself and the outer world as part of your family and part of the community and part of bigger rings that go around there, just to be at peace in your spirit.
And notice the progression here, Wendy. I mean, notice how one of these virtues leads to the next and augments it. Yeah, right? So if you have an understanding of what love's all about, that you are loved and you have the capacity to love, okay? All of a sudden now you'll come to a deeper understanding of joy.
That's right.
As soon as that joy lodges itself consistently within your spirit, all of a sudden you have this sense of shalom. You have this sense of peace and fulfillment and contentment with whatever comes, right?
Yeah.
And then once you get that, once you have that perspective, guess what comes next?
You're more patient.
You're patient. You have more perspective. You're not racing through trying to get out of everything all of a sudden, but you can settle into life. So, I mean, really and truly, you talk about the wisdom in Paul's writing. It's really evident here as he strings these things together and one fuels the next. It's beautiful vision.
I never saw the linear progression
Beautiful
of those.
vision.
Dang, that's really good.
Well, I think it's seriously, it's worth considering. And once you have the patience, now that you feel like you have the time not to be racing away from everybody and everything, now this kindness takes root in you.
It just comes out of you.
It comes.
Yeah.
It comes. And you can think of, I'm sure you have practical examples, of this in your own life.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Just being kind enough to reach something on the shelf at the grocery store and hand it to a person.
Right.
To pick up a little one who's fallen and hurt themselves.
Right. So this is beautiful, right? So what if you're racing through life, trying to climb the ladder, win the race, trample everybody in the process?
Me-centered.
Right?
It's all about me. Let's go.
Now, you're just to play with this metaphor a little bit more. You're going down the aisle at the grocery store. You see somebody who needs help reaching a can or whatever you just said. I apologize. They're an inconvenience.
Yeah, they have to stop.
They are a cause for delay.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
As soon as you get the patience thing worked out, now what was an inconvenience, by and through the work of the Spirit, becomes this glorious welcome opportunity that you've been looking for since first thing this morning.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you see how quickly it's
amazing.
It flips.
Well, and I've got to tell you,
not that we're going to master this every day.
No.
But this is worth thinking through.
But they better hope you're shopping because I'm 5'3" and there's no way I'm reaching it. They're going to better hope you're shopping.
I'm already stuck at the front of the store talking to the greeter. I'm never going to get anyway.
So once we have kindness, we're putting that kindness out into the world.
Yeah.
Goodness. Now that so explain to me what goodness means.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great word, right? What is goodness? So, well, first of all, you could make it a personal attribute. So we understand, by the very nature of the way the world is constructed, what's good and bad. Mm-hmm. And we do understand that because we see things, we have a sense of things as they should be, and then we see those things in their broken state.
Right.
Okay? So that's the first thing. And we can understand that goodness in our own lives because we understand what we are to be about. Thanks be to God. Mm-hmm. Because we have this covenant in our lives.
Evidence of right and wrong, you're saying then.
There is a sense, all right? There is a sense.
Okay.
I mean, when we kneel in the service to repent, we're not making that up as we go along.
Now, that's a posture of humility.
It's a posture of humility. And the things we are repenting of, we clearly know that we have done amiss.
There you go.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Right. So how do we get to goodness?
Yeah. Well,
we seek to resolve those.
That's right.
Those shortcomings.
Yeah.
So that goodness can be a personal attribute. That goodness can also be a posture.
Nice.
That looks a little bit more like kindness, right? Think of someone truly having your best interest at heart. That's different than kindness, but there is a goodness in it, right?
Yeah.
And I think, so here again, think about the progression. You've got kindness unfolding. And think about the commentary that we all share. You know, I went to help, but I just feel like I got more out of that than I gave.
Very common. Yeah.
Okay. Now we understand there's value in being good. We no longer live in the old economy that is about accumulation of the material things.
Yeah.
But now we can trade in something like goodness and see its value as we live these lives of faith. I'm saying, again.
And interestingly,
glorious.
The next word is faithfulness.
Right. Because now we see the value. We understand the inherent goodness that is within us and available to all of us. And now we can remain faithful to that. We can attach ourselves to that project.
To knowing that kindness and goodness, that faithfulness is recognizing that this is how you get to the feeling of goodness and serenity and peace.
And it's also faithfulness because when you get to that point in the progression, you're living the kingdom. You're living the kingdom life.
Yeah.
You're glimpsing what God had hoped for.
From the very beginning.
Right. The common good.
Well, the next one, and this is really perfect, is gentleness. Mm-hmm. Because instead of being a Karen, and I guess the male version now is Chad. Did you know that?
No, I don't know this. Who?
Karen.
Karen.
Karen is and my apologies to anyone named Karen, but this is the name they give to people who, I want to talk to the manager right now.
Oh, lack gentleness. Okay.
Yes, right?
So there's
those persons who try to,
it's kind of a persona.
Screaming in your face and all of those types of things. Yeah. But you recognize even when things aren't the way you want them to be, when you have all of these attributes, you get to a point of gentleness where you look at the person as a flawed human being just like the rest of us, a sinner and a saint. Yeah. And you say, God bless you. You're probably having a really bad day. I apologize for that. Or maybe you've done something wrong. And instead of biting back, you say, you are so right. I apologize. Getting to the point where things don't ruffle your feathers like they used to. You're just softer. Yeah. And kinder and gentler.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, so if we get this far along in the progression, I think that gentleness is a kind of spiritual oil check for us.
Yeah.
Really. Because by the time you get to this point, there's a couple of temptations. One is self-righteousness. You know, once you get to this place where you are really being fed and the Spirit is active, there is a temptation to say, why can't everybody else be just like me?
Because you're among humans.
Wouldn't this world be awesome?
If I ran the show.
Exactly. So gentleness keeps us from that kind of pride. The other temptation is to say, now that I have this all figured out, I'm going to drift off into the sunset because I don't want to be encumbered with all of the burdens and the unseemliness of this world.
Sure.
The gentleness, I think, also keeps us from isolation.
Yes, I'm picturing when Jesus met the leper, he did so with gentleness and kindness, recognizing the spirit of the poor guy, you know, and reaching down and caring for people like Mother Teresa, who walked among people who were desperately in need and didn't envision them as anything other than souls that needed tended to.
Right.
With a kindness. She was a gentle person ever. Yeah.
But bear in mind, back to the topic.
Yeah.
That commitment to self-control needs to remain constant.
Yeah.
So that we can be thinking through and tending to these different virtues as they come to fruition, excuse the word, but as they come to fruition in our lives, right?
So because the next word then, all positive, wonderful things so far, right? And linear, thanks for pointing that out. That was fantastic. And then bam, we get this self-control thing, which sounds, you know, like, well, there's a damper.
It's just going to pull you back in.
So explain that.
It's going to pull you back into that process so that you can be aware, continually aware of God's activity in your life.
So we don't get complacent.
Yeah. As soon as you lose that self-control, then just like that, you're back off the rail, so to speak. You know, back into the selfishness, back into the... You're right, the inordinate desires, or whatever the case may be. But the self-control really is the capstone of the list because it allows you to see all of these beautiful gifts unfolding in your life perpetually, consistently.
Regardless of what's going on in your life, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's another thing that folks struggle with, I know I have, is when you keep looking back on your life and then you say, yeah, but you know, that's how I was raised. Or you look back and say, my dad was like this, or I didn't have a father in the home. Or I did.
And all of those things, by the way, may be true.
Important.
And there are consequences to all of those things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So the key is that even though those were in your history, you can find all of these fruits of the Spirit in you.
Yes. Yes. Right. The divine dignity is always present. And I think that's important too. Remember, where did we start? What was the first fruit of the Spirit?
The first fruit of the Spirit is love.
Right. So the divine dignity is always, always there. There is no external worldly circumstance that can strip you of the light that is distinctively yours and at the same time distinctively divine. That cannot be snuffed out. And so if we can fan that flame, even if it's a flicker, there's always hope. There's always hope. And I think that's important. We've got to honor those circumstances.
Of course.
People have been through some serious struggle that needs to be taken seriously. But at the same time, we want to make sure that they know their value, their worth, their potential.
Because I think that's what goes first.
Yeah.
Is your feeling of self-worth.
Yes.
Or value.
Well, and think about, how convenient that is for evil then in the world.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm not worth anything, I have nothing to lose.
That's right.
You just think about some of the narratives that can spin out from that.
I'm hurt, so I'm going to hurt you.
On and on and on.
Yeah.
And those are, again, those are very real postures.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I imagine that if we have recognition of the fruits of the Spirit within us, right? All those we just talked about, and we can display them in our lives, we can bring light out into this darkness of this world. And although there will be darkness, we can we're going to let this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Right?
That's the baptismal.
That's exactly right.
You go, you let your light shine.
That's right.
And so that your good works can glorify your Father. That's after you receive and are welcomed into the community, the message is clear.
Yeah.
Go shine your light.
Shine your light.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that I've learned to shine my light is to not walk into the darkness, right? I take my light places, but there are certain places I just do not go because I know that's...
Well, you have to, I think that's fair. You have to know your limitations.
Peace isn't there, right? So I've learned not to bring up conversations about politics.
Yeah.
I have a vote. This is really all I can do about it. Screaming at the television or at a neighbor isn't going to really help me any.
Screaming in general. But
there's that, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a part of the problem.
No, that's true.
That's a part of the... it's not... See, we talked about goodness before. Political discourse isn't the problem. I mean, there's a lot of good. Just ask the ancient Romans.
Debate.
There's a
Critical.
lot of good that can come out of political discourse.
Well, Luther debated everything, and look what came out of that.
The issue is that our political discourse at the moment is severely flawed.
Exactly.
And nobody wants to own up to its
That's right.
brokenness.
That's right.
To repent of it and find a healthier, more constructive way. And the loudest person is the rightest.
I know.
Which is
That's
not
horrible.
true. I mean, in the old way, in the old training where you learned logic and debate, the first person that raised their voice acknowledged that they had lost the argument. That volume now had to be a substitute for substance.
Love it.
But now, volume is the great decider of he who shouts loudest, right?
Yeah.
That's the opposite
Or-
of the way things should be. So I don't blame you for saying, I don't want to be a part of it.
I don't.
Right? Yeah,
No.
I understand.
Well, because also you cannot convince the unconvincible.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need you to see it my way. It doesn't mean I don't love you.
Right.
It just means we don't see this as the same point of view. Right. And I just have to watch the influences of the world on my heart.
Well, it's nice. I mean, I think actually, Wendy, it's a nice tie-in because there's a self-awareness there, right? And you had mentioned earlier about the 5 people that you surround yourself with. I mean, I forget exactly how you phrased
You
that.
are the average of
You're
the
the
5
average
people
of
you
those
spend the
5
most time
people,
with.
and I think that there is some value in saying, hey, look, it might not just be the 5 people. It might be the 5 sources of entertainment.
That's right.
Or information, or,
Whatever I let in.
Yeah. Exactly. Sorry to interrupt, but I just think that's a good insight.
It's true. And another thing is turning your point of view, that lens we talked about earlier, turning that around to a positive instead of a negative. So when I'm tired, I just want to go home and we're out of milk. And I've got to stand in line, and that lady in front of me is fiddling with her.
Here we go again.
And I'm leaning on my cart like, come on, lady, move it, right? Yeah. I was reminded once by a dear friend of mine who said to me, instead of complaining about standing in line, why don't you take that opportunity to pray and of gratitude that you get to stand in that line? That you get to have food in a cart, that you get to go to a grocery store where food is readily available.
Or evoke some compassion within your heart. I mean, all of the things you just mentioned are absolutely right and fantastic, but use your creative side, and instead of seeing that person in front of you as an annoyance, use them as a source of inspiration. Craft a little narrative. Get imaginative about who they are and what they're up to and why they're there and taking their time. Because it could be that person has been home alone all day long. And the 38-second interaction with that cashier is the sum total of their human contact, and interaction in the course of that day. Yeah. And how does that change your heart?
So that's where self-awareness comes in, and then reflects my ability to have self-control. Yeah. That I look at that person with love, and my spirit and her spirit connecting without even really, I was just reaching out and thinking, maybe a smile to that person. Or when that person turns around and says, I'm so sorry, I know I'm taking long. Yeah. Instead of rolling your eyes and you say, I've got all day, go.
Yeah.
Just
and the
take
value
your time.
of self-control is that it'll remind you, you're going to use the same amount of energy. And, and you will not, despite how many times you have watched Star Wars, you will not be able to move the person in front of you with your mind.
No, that's darn it.
They're there, and when they decide to go, they're going to go. So your self-control, if you understand its worth, will remind you, you're going to use the same amount of time. You're going to expend the same amount of energy. Consider how you want to invest it. How do you want to utilize the energy that you're going to expend in that given moment? Can it be an expression of love and kindness and peace and all this kind of, or is it just going to be fuming?
Of course.
Right?
And then you get in the car, and it's like that old proverbial, you go home, you yell at the dog bites the cat, the cat bites the kid. I mean, it's just like this perpetual negativity out into the world, and we can change that.
You can.
By something as simple as the fruits of the Spirit. Right? Putting that out into the world.
And I think the other important thing here is so often we hear, I'm one person. I'm just one person. What can I really do to affect the climate of my community?
Oh boy.
Think it through, right? Because you might not want to hear the answer to that question. Because when you realize just how much potential and capacity that you actually have, it may be a little bit too much responsibility.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we all have a story of a person who said just the right thing.
Yes.
We needed to hear at the right time. And you can go out into the world and try to share that with other people.
Well, and then how many ever people you touch
exactly
with that graciousness from there. These are not cliches. This is lived, quantifiable, real world experience. It's not Pastor Dan and Wendy sitting around, kicking around some more spiritual mumbo jumbo. I mean,
is that what it was?
I mean, no. I mean, and that's exactly what I'm saying.
Sure.
I mean, we take this stuff seriously.
Yeah.
Because we see the way in which it has literally transformed the world.
Absolutely.
Since about 70, 80 AD. And we had to live with that.
There you go.
Yeah. But if you want to call that sunny side up, it's fine with me.
I do like sunny side up. Right. Plus, people like hanging around with you a lot more when you are that person. I guess it comes with age. Truly, when you get reflective.
I think so, but I think not exclusively.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen the young person that everybody kind of says they're wise beyond their years. You've heard that.
I have.
And we see that kind of perspective in some of the younger generation as well. Maybe it's because something they've been through.
Sure.
Or maybe they're just gifted in that way. But yeah, it comes to us in different seasons, and sometimes we have it and sometimes we lose it. But as long as we know what we're looking for,
that's right.
I think we'll be able to find it.
Yeah. And we talked about this in the last podcast about why you should go to church, because the things we talk about here and the experiences we have here put us in the right direction to create the fruits of the Spirit. Yeah. And things that come at you, common everyday things that would annoy the daylights out of most people, and used to me, still do.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a process. It's not like we walk through this gate and all of a sudden...
There's nothing mastered here.
It's not that we don't get angry. I mean, anger can be a very valuable emotion. It's not that we don't get angry. I think that the Christian experience and the commitment to the fruits of the Spirit and an understanding of the value of self-control as a virtue allow us to have different conversations around that anger. We're going to get angry. So Pastor Dan gets angry. Boom. I get the wrong email or the wrong call.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No. Yeah, right. But this is the real world. And so I get spun up.
Sure.
Just like everybody else. I have some decisions to make. I'm sorry. It's just true. I can call my 3 best buddies, commiserate, get spun up that much more, build my case.
You're justified and you should
build my case, have it confirmed and affirmed and my fire fueled, and then just go right back at it.
Yeah.
Am I right?
You are.
That's one kind of conversation that I can have around anger. Too many of us are having that kind of conversation. Or we can take a deep breath and have a different conversation that sounds a little bit more like, hey, someone I love and trust, here's been my experience. What do you think?
What do I do with this?
What do I do with this?
Yeah.
That's a whole different ball of wax. How can I take this interaction that has got me just absolutely steamed, find something redemptive in it, and then turn the conversation and the future interaction into something meaningful and constructive? That's not pie in the sky. That's not. That is a way to live. That's an ethic that should be present in the life of the Christian.
And you know how you get there? Practice.
Practice.
Yeah, there is no perfection in that. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
we covered a lot of ground.
We surely did, and I am so grateful.
I just feel like we did not exercise much self-control.
Yeah. Well, I hope this has been helpful. It has for me, and just talking through the takeaway, big takeaway for me is that linear view of the fruits. I did not realize they were in order for a reason. That makes perfect sense.
Who knows?
I love that.
We're giving reason to that. You know what I'm saying? We're reading some interpretation into it, but I think it's a valid one.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Tremendous topic.
Thank you.
Wonderful conversation, and I hope it blesses the folks that are going to listen. And it just so happens that it kind of comes at an opportune time of the year, because we're at the moment sitting on the verge of Lent. So
yes, we are. Very
time
good.
Of serious self-reflection.
Well, there you have it.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Wendy. Appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you.